All right, welcome back to ABA Exam Review and our continuation of our BCBA Task List series. Today we're starting C, Measurement, Data Display, and Interpretation. Now we're starting to get to the nitty-gritty, the more technical things. We've built our foundation, and now we're going to expand on that foundation. We can't focus on just the hard stuff. We can't focus just on the easy stuff. We need to be fluent in all of it. So we're going to start with C1, Operational Definitions of Behavior. Now, this is actually pretty straightforward. It's not that complicated. It's not that technical. But again, it's foundational. It's just as important as our other skills, and maybe even more so. So as always, check out behavioranalyststudy.com for all of our study materials. Like, subscribe, let us know when you pass. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. So C1, Operational Definitions of Behavior. Now, why are operational definitions important? Because operational definitions allow us to be accurate, reliable, and valid in our evaluation of behavior. We can't be accurate, meaning measuring exactly what's occurring. We can't be reliable, meaning able to measure the same thing over and over again. And we can't be valid, meaning measuring what we want to measure without a good, well-written definition of behavior. If you've ever been in a situation where you've dealt with a poorly defined behavior, you can understand how frustrating it is because you're not always sure what you're looking for or what you're looking at. Your definition should leave no doubt to your technicians about what they are observing. You want to be as precise as possible. Now, there are two primary ways to define behavior. You can define it based on function, or you can define them based on topography. Now, as a behavior analyst, especially if you choose to work in the field of autism, you will likely never use a topography-based definition alone, okay? Because topography-based definitions aren't complete. They lack function, and we need function, because function describes what is the effect on the environment, and that's what we're looking for, right? What effect does the behavior have on the environment? So when you define something based on the function, you take all the responses that have the same effect on the environment and you put them all into one category. And so when you write your definition and say the behavior is attention seeking, then all these different behaviors that serve the purpose or affect the environment in an attention seeking way are included in that definition. Topography-based definition varies because responses are simply based on shape, look, or form. How does the response look? We're not too worried about its effect on the environment. Now, topography-based can give you all kinds of issues because a behavior can look a certain way, but then serve multiple functions, right? You can also have a million different variations. If we're talking social skills, think about social skills and how many variations of social skills. It'd be almost impossible to define something like that topographically because there are so many different variations of shape, look, and form. So you've got to be careful, right? Now, one advantage of topography-based definitions is you can target specific undesirable forms, right? So you can specifically pick out certain behaviors and how they look and say, well, if it looks this way, we're going to target it for reduction. So that's one advantage. But ultimately, everything should include function and should be function-based. Now, a behavior analyst should avoid selecting behaviors solely on the basis of what? An A, topography, obviously, for what all the reasons we just mentioned, right? Function is the effect on the environment. It's why the behavior is occurring. Topography is just what does that behavior look like, which can be deceptive, right? Given looks don't always match the function. And it's really difficult to identify every single possible topography of certain behaviors. So getting into the actual definitions, right? We've chosen our behavior, we've chosen our function, and now we want to define it in a way that we can measure and change that behavior in a socially valid way. So a good definition of behavior, first and foremost, is accurate, complete, and concise. Now, some people will say objective, clear, and complete. The point being is you've got to be very systematic in your definitions of behavior. Take your time writing behavioral definitions. So first, be objective, right? Describe everything in observational terms, not I feel this or I think it's this or No, you have to be objective. There is no subjectivity in behavior definitions because you're not the one who's going to be using this definition. Who's going to use the definition? Your parents, or the parents of your families, I should say, your technicians, other team members. So sure, you can write a definition and know exactly what you mean, but if you do not describe it and you're not objective, then you've got to think about how will other people interpret this. When I was doing my training at FIT, they always told a story about a child whose behavior was defined as aggressive. And this kid had been doing great. And one day he threw a piece of paper at his friend playfully, and he got in trouble for being aggressive. Now, clearly he wasn't aggressing anybody, but the definition just said aggressive, right? And that is going to get your team in a lot of trouble. Now, be clear. So definition should be unambiguous and understandable by experienced observers, meaning when I read that definition, I don't just read aggressive because that's very ambiguous. It is very specific, right? Client balls up fist and makes a swinging motion in an attempt to contact another person. That is unambiguous, understandable by experienced observers. And you can really go down the rabbit hole of being as clear as possible. And that's fine. You want to write it in a way that other people will understand it. Again, it doesn't matter if you understand it if nobody else can. And then be complete. You want to try to include all possible scenarios and variables that may play a part in the behavior. So your assessment, if it's thorough, should include all these different opportunities or possible situations where this behavior might occur, what it might look like, the effect it has on the environment. And you can also include non-examples, right? Behavior looks like this for this reason. Behavior does not include this, right? Non-examples are just as important because if I see that non-example, I know, okay, I'm not taking data. I'm not trying to change it. This is not overly complicated, but it does take work. It takes effort and it takes focus. People tend to get very lazy in their behavioral definitions. Don't be lazy in the behavior definitions. That's when you end up with team members reinforcing the wrong things, punishing the wrong things, shaping the wrong topographies, and it's just a mess. Be objective, be clear, and be complete. So consider the following behavior definition. A golfer's club hits the ground before the ball, but produces a good shot despite the poor swing. Is this definition function or topography based? Well, you have to ask yourself, is it talking about the effect on the environment or how it looks? Well, in this case, I think we're talking about both, right? Club hits the ground before the ball, topography, but produces a good shot despite the poor swing. So we've got topography, hits the ground before the ball, and we've got the function, produces a good shot. So this definition is based on C, function, and topography. Then finally, when we are selecting target behaviors for definition, we select behaviors that are socially valid. Behaviors should be important and meaningful to those involved. If you have a child who is highly impacted, your behaviors for target for change will look very different than a kid maybe who has very mild symptoms. What's going to matter is, are these behaviors important and are they meaningful to all those involved? So criteria for behavior change should be based on socially valid levels of performance. Meaning when I pick my mastery level, which you're going to include in your goals, you need to pick levels that are socially valid. If your goal is to get somebody to be able to cook a meal for themselves, then they need to be able to do that to a meaningful level. Watching them do it one time under supervision with a very controlled environment doesn't necessarily constitute a socially valid level of performance. So how do you determine that? Well, there's two different ways. You can consider and watch highly competent individuals and what they consider valid levels of performance. Now, don't take this as, well, I need to be an expert. This could simply mean we're all highly competent at putting our pants on. So you could watch somebody, what's a valid level of putting your pants on independently, right? And so looking at other people who can do the skill competently is a good judge of what's the right criteria. or you can just experiment with different levels of performance to determine what is and is not acceptable. If you're going through a skill, you're teaching a skill, and you watch them do the skill, and everything seems fine, right? Then maybe that's the criteria for that particular individual. Because remember, we're all made different. We all have different levels of ability and capabilities. And so maybe they can't do it as perfectly as somebody else, but perfect does not equal social validity. Social validity doesn't mean perfection. It just means competence. Is it an important change? Is it a meaningful change? Right. So those are two ways to assess the criteria of behavior change based on socially valid levels of performance. All right. That is operational definitions of behavior. Again, pretty foundational skill to start. C. We're going to get into some more technical nitty gritty later on. Be clear, be concise, be complete, right? Be objective, and you're going to be fine. Take your time on behavioral definitions. Trust me, it's going to save you headaches down the road when your technicians are at session and they're texting you, well, what does this mean? What does this mean? Get ahead of that. Write good definitions to begin with, and everything else will fall into place. So we'll continue this next week. I'm going to try to put out more and more videos as we go to try to get more videos out in a more quick time frame. But as for now, we'll continue C next week. Check out behavioranalyststudy.com for all of our study materials. Work hard, study hard. See you soon.